Hello and welcome to Thunder Pirates. Just before we begin, I'd like to wish you all a happy new year and welcome you to 2017. So, for 2017 it looks like Gaijin has added Japanese ground vehicles to War Thunder, which is great because we've been awaiting Japanese ground vehicles into the game War Thunder for quite a while. Unfortunately, they're not really that impressive, at least at Tier 1. I have not yet had the opportunity to try them above Tier 1. However, that was kind of expected. I don't think anyone was really expecting Japanese ground vehicles, especially those of World War I era, to be that impressive. Certainly not those that are not prototypes. Because in World War II, Japan didn't really focus on tanks, didn't have that many tanks, and as a result, it's quite understandable. I mean, their tank development was quite poor, didn't have much tank development, and they didn't develop many new tanks, really. They didn't really think they needed them, and they didn't at first. So anyway, what do we have here? This is the Ha-Go, appropriately named, I think. It's the first Tier 1 Japanese tank you get. It's a light tank, and it is indeed very, very light indeed. And it has also got a counterpart, which is slightly heavier, much slower, and has a bigger gun, but I wouldn't recommend going for it. I'm not even going to showcase it in this video, because it is so terrible. It would be just no fun at all. Now, the Ha-Go has in itself some pretty good features. It is very fast, it has very good mobility, and the gun isn't too bad. It has a fairly significant drop rate, but it's okay. The only problem is the armour is incredibly weak, which is understandable since this is a light tank. That's even weaker than on a lot of other light tanks, as you can see here. So next, I chose the Chiha. Let's skip the mobility just for now. This is the first tank I researched in the Japanese tech tree. Until that, I was just driving around what, to me, are basically just tractors with guns on board. This is the first tank, as I would call it, on the Japanese tech tree. It has a terrible gun. And it's not that the gun itself isn't powerful or is really bad. It can kill tanks, and it's very effective when it does hit and penetrate armor. However, because the shells have such a high drop rate, it is very difficult to get used to. The tank's mobility also isn't that great, which is unfortunate. And just like its lighter predecessors, this tank does not have a lot of armour. In fact, its armour is pretty much pointless. It doesn't really serve much of a purpose at all. So then, at this point you're wondering, well, is there anything good about the Japanese ground forces at all? And well, yes, I think there is. First of all, the Ha-Go isn't too bad of a tank, and while it features pretty much no armour at all and is not very powerful, it does have a decent enough gun and is certainly fast enough and mobile enough to compete with plenty of tanks at its tier. Now then, the anti-aircraft guns. What does Japan have in the field of anti-aircraft guns? Well, it has an incredibly fast anti-aircraft gun. This truck can reach over 40 kilometers an hour, according to the stat card. Unfortunately, on the roads, it doesn't seem to actually reach these speeds. I've maxed it out at around 24 to 30 kilometers an hour. So we're just going to speed up this footage for you, just to simulate what it would be like if the vehicle drove at the kind of speed that it's supposed to be capable of. Also to save time, because I can't really fit all of this into my video. So what's so special about this anti-aircraft truck then, if it's not very fast? Well, it has a very good gun. It's a 20mm magazine-fed machine cannon. And it has a very high fire rate and is pretty good at destroying tanks at its battle rating. Another thing you'll notice about this vehicle is it doesn't have very good brakes. It's not very good at staying still. Of course, being just a van with an anti-aircraft gun on the back, it doesn't have any armour, which is understandable. However, the gun, well, that makes up for the lack of armour entirely. In fact, I would take it to the point where I would say that this anti-aircraft truck is in fact better used as a self-propelled gun, an anti-tank gun. Don't move around too much, just make sure you're in a good position to snipe out on enemy tanks and aircraft at the same time. Like, for example, a hill. And as I'm about to demonstrate, this vehicle is pretty good at destroying tanks, even from long ranges and from the front. I got a little bit lucky there with the drive shaft being hit rather than my crew, which would have been quite disastrous since I only have 3 crew members and they can die rather quickly. Nonetheless, once you're done destroying tanks, it's always good to try and help your team cap back their cap circle. And so that's what I tried to do here. Unfortunately, Japanese tanks are so bad that we almost always lose, and quite spectacularly too. So, as it happens, well, I had to leave the cap circle and leave my teammate on his own because I could do nothing to defend him and would have died if I had just sat there. And you can see my teammate, my crew member, disappearing from the vehicle because he is dead. So that leaves me to hide behind a hill for a while and try and get some points so I can spawn into another vehicle. And that is why this vehicle is so good. It's versatile, it can destroy tanks and aircraft, and it can do both very effectively. However, the armour, yet again, as with pretty much all Japanese tanks that I have so far driven, lets it down. As you can see there, that LVAT is taking a lot of damage, and that's the problem with a lot of tanks that the Japanese tanks encounter, is that they are capable of taking quite a lot of damage, especially those which are much larger, such as the LVATs. This becomes a problem even when you're trying to pump as many shells into those vehicles as possible. And if you get ambushed from various sides, well, you're pretty much stuck. So, what is a man to do when the new Japanese tanks that they've been looking forward to for such a long time haven't quite turned out to be as good as they'd hoped? Well, the only answer I can think of that truly works, well, that's to go and destroy them. You'll pretty much have an easy time destroying Japanese tanks, although in this particular tank match I did make my first expedition out into the open quite blunderous. Bit of a drift there for you in that anti-aircraft gun truck. And here's where you demonstrate just how weak the armour is. I'm here using a 12.7mm machine gun. That is all I have on this vehicle. The Japanese are using cover. They are hiding behind buildings. And yet, the Shak's cannon 12.7mm heavy machine gun is plenty enough to at least critically damage most of the Japanese vehicles at this battle rating. Of course, yet again my foolishness lets me down. Even though I'm in a powerful truck, I can't win the day on my own. Get yourself surrounded in any tank in War Thunder and you're in trouble, no matter which nation you're from. Of course though, whilst playing the Allied tanks as opposed to the Axis tanks, I have much more choice in whether or not I go out into the open or not. In Japanese tanks, your team tends to die very quickly, leaving you out in the open whether you like it or not. However, in Russian, American, British tanks, this problem is less pronounced and doesn't occur as much. So I gained enough points to take in the PO2 and fly it around like a madman, which worked quite well. In Tier 1 tank matches, the PO2 is pretty much unbeatable in terms of quality of flying, handling, and bombing characteristics. Its rear gunner is also very effective and very good, and I apologise for speeding up the tape here, but I am really running out of video time. But as you can see, even the mighty PO2 is no match to a horde of Japanese aircraft. And eventually, I was shot down. Though I survived and landed rather neatly, I think, on the ground. Nonetheless, this wasn't enough to save me entirely, as the aggressive Japanese pilots came in to finish the kill. So next I decided to take out a vehicle which would be both plenty effective at destroying tanks and good enough for me to exact my revenge on the irritating Japanese aircraft. After several attempts and a base capture, I eventually saw my opportunity to take revenge. And I let rip. In short bursts, of course, but it was effective enough. These biplanes aren't exactly strong, and a 20mm cannon will put them out of their misery rather quickly, if well enough aimed. The T-60's 20mm cannon is of course also plenty enough to kill other tanks. I didn't get an opportunity to do that in this match because our team won rather quickly and with, well, the kind of drama that you'd expect from a match in which one side has very good, well-tested, trusted and overall well-performing tanks, and against the other side which does not have that benefit. And finally, another vehicle drift for you in the Russian Shak's anti-aircraft truck.